Another example of the filthy racism of this pig Donald Trump, a statue of a Confederate general that was torn down and set on fire 5 years ago during the Black Lives Matter protests in D.C. That statue has just been cleaned up and reinstalled under orders from the filthy toilet rat. Is there anybody who doesn't acknowledge the fact that Trump is the most racist son of a bitch outside of Woodrow Wilson, maybe? You remember Wilson invited the Klan into the fucking White House. And those bad old days were supposed to be over, right? Well, they're not. As a matter of fact, we're entering into a new era, especially when the Supreme Court guts the remaining part of the Civil Rights Act of 1965. What was it? 64, I guess. And there's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now that has to do with the last part of that they didn't destroy a year or two ago when they removed, I think, the first section of the Civil Rights Act. So racism is sticking its horned head up again out of the fucking sewer, led by Donald Trump. And this statue of General Albert Pike. Albert Pike. I never heard of him. Did you? All I know about Albert Pike was he was a Confederate general, which means he was a traitor to the United States. And I've said this before. After this insurrection that occurred in the 1860s that resulted in 700,000 Americans being killed, that was immediate battle casualties. We don't know how many people. Another what? 2, 3, 4, 500,000 people died of the wounds. You have to remember the times. What the fuck did they do with a bullet wound or a wound by cannon shot? 150 years ago. 175 years ago? How did you help that soldier who had been shot recover? Well, you didn't. If he was grievously wounded in his legs, you cut his legs off. And then what? Then he got gangrene. And then what? And then he fucking died screaming in his own decay. Ooh. All right. Enough. Sorry. So that's what General Albert Pike was, one of the leaders. And in my opinion, those people should have been tried fairly, due process, and if found guilty, put up against a wall someplace and fucking shot. And I am opposed to capital punishment. But anyway, the National Park Service announced a couple of months ago, I remember talking about this, that there were plans to return so many of the statues that were taken down. Why the fuck what is it about people in this country, white Americans, who insist they have to celebrate traitors to the United States? That always puzzled me. And I've told you before, I lived in Richmond, Virginia, for a period of time, year and a half. And I remember driving up and down Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia, and every fucking cross street, in the little parks there would be a statue of one of these traitorous fucking dogs. Celebrated. And I think about all the black folk who had to drive past that shit every day. And those statues were taken down. I wonder how much power the toilet rat has in putting statues back up. I don't think he has much, except in D.C., which is where this prick Albert Pike statue is going to go back up. So, anyway, the National Park Service announced a couple of months ago that the plan was in the works to return General Pike's statue, right? After the toilet rat signed an executive order that called for, get this, quote, restoring truth and sanity to American history, end quote. No, it's restoring lies, traitors, and madness to American history. Now, look, I've said before, if certain people in this country want to memorialize the traitorous fucking slime who tried to end this country, and you want to make a statue, fine. Put it in a museum of traitors. Who the fuck says it has to be out in public space where people have to look at it every day? And besides, most people who pass these statues just don't pay attention to them. I remember when I lived in Richmond, I didn't know what the fuck look, there's a Confederate general. Okay, yawn, who cares? Well, That was just prior to my gaining consciousness about these issues. But anyway, the Democratic representative from the District of Columbia, the D.C., I'm referring to Eleanor Holmes Norton. She called the restoration of the statue of this traitorous pig, Albert Pike, she called it, quote, offensive to members of the military who serve honorably, end quote. And yesterday afternoon, Monday afternoon, or 2 days ago, Monday afternoon, videos on social media showed the area surrounding the traitorous fucker's statue in Washington with a sign that read, area closed, historic preservation work in progress. Historic racist filth in progress. So, this National Park Service freak, who obviously is one of the toilet rat's little filletors, he said, the restoration aligns with federal responsibilities under historic preservation law and recent executive orders to beautify the nation's capital and restore pre-existing statues. Beautify? That's the kind of fucking language that's being used. Beautify Washington, D.C. with statues of filthy, traitorous slime. And this fucking toilet rat tells his fools at the National Park Service to refer to it as beautifying Washington, D.C. Jesus Christ. This particular statue, I guess because it's D.C., it's the only one that the toilet rat can order through his fucking executive orders to be reinstalled. But the statue, according to what I have here, was built in 1901. It's been a source of controversy for a number of years. And members of local government in D.C. have been calling for its removal for decades, right? Miss Holmes Norton, longtime critic of the statue, has introduced legislation to remove the statue permanently. Multiple times she tried to do this. And in a statement after the statue was restored, she said this, quote, Pike himself served dishonorably. He took up arms against the United States, misappropriated funds, and was ultimately captured and imprisoned by his own troops. End quote. I mean, Pike, apparently, like I said, I know nothing about him except a little bit of research that has come my way. But he was a real fucking maniac. Even his own troops eventually came to the point where they seized him and put his ass in the stockade. So, Eleanor Holmes Norton added this, quote, Confederate statues should be placed in museums as historical artifacts, not remain in parks or other locations that imply honor. Well, yes, that makes sense, doesn't it? And because it makes sense, it to use an expression, it won't fly, not in Trump's government, this fucking Nazi racist pig. Now, the statue, like I mentioned, was pulled down in 2020, but when it was taken down, it was the only monument to a Confederate general in the nation's capital. He was apparently, like I said, a little bit of research discovered on him. He was a longtime leader of the Freemasons, against whom I have nothing. I don't give a shit. Freemason, Shreemason, who gives a shit? But as you know, it's a centuries-old secretive society, and they're the ones who paid for the statue, the Freemasons. What else? His critics accused him of being instrumental in the formation of the Klan, of course. And the Freemason organization insists that evidence doesn't support that. Oh, what the fuck are you talking about? Anyway, the plaque that previously sat at the foot of the statue, I guess, it said this, that the statue honored an author, poet, scholar, soldier, jurist, orator, philanthropist, and philosopher. They left out traitorous fucking dog who should have been shot in the street. Jailed by his own men. Philosopher, philanthropist, okay. Ah! Now, anti-racism protesters, if you remember this, I do, they used ropes and chains to pull down this fucking statue following the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And then President Trump, who was in his first term in 2020, and those Black Lives Matter protests scared the piss out of him, to the point, remember he asked General Malloy, can't we just shoot him in the knees? Fucking idiot. But that occurred during Trump's first term. And, of course, he condemned the toppling. On Twitter, he wrote this, quote, the D.C. police are not doing their job as they watch the statue be ripped down and burn. Ripped down and burn. Yeah. These people should be immediately arrested. A disgrace to our country. Stupid, ignorant savage. Jesus Christ. It's Trump. See, to Trump, General Pike was not a disgrace to the country, even though he tried to end the country. That's how fucked up Donald Trump's calcifying brain has become. Oh, and by the way, I might get to this later in the week, but apparently he really has made an asshole out of himself and consequently the United States with some of the shit that he said on this Asian tour of his. And please keep in mind that the Asian tour is about making connections to enrich himself and the rest of his slimy fucking family. He's not there on behalf of the United States. Oh, he has all the accoutrement of that. He has all the trappings, the flags, and the and Air Force One, and the military of this, and the blah, 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 blah. But he's there for himself. Trump is always playing to an audience of one, himself. He doesn't give a fuck about anybody. And as we certainly know, as you've heard it many times, not just on this little podcast, but since this slimy bastard got back into the White House, he's ordered statues and paintings of these Confederate traitors to be reinstated, to be put back wherever they were before people in this country, people who love this country, decided that they had had enough of this son of a bitch. And, well, the statues anyway, they'd had enough. So they started taking them down and burning them and doing with them what should have been done to begin with. And they never should have been put up to begin with. And many of those statues were not put up, maybe none of them put up by the government of the United States, but by these organizations like Daughters of the American Revolution or Daughters of the Confederacy or fucked up idiots of racist policy. Jesus Christ. It just doesn't stop, does it? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.